Well, hello, Christina, and thank you for being here in Romania in our house that we just transformed in a studio. And I'm very glad to receive you and Stan here with us. And
thank you, Jorge.
it was really a pleasure and an honor for us to have you here.
It's been wonderful spending the time with you and being here in your beautiful home.
Well, Christina, I invite you at a very friendly discussion, a free discussion on your book. In fact, the central theme of your book in Romanian is Setea, the thirst for wholeness. And that's because it's a very important subject, not only in Romania, I think everywhere in the world. All kind of addictions and the roots of addictions. And you come in this book and in your work, because I understood it's a very long period of time where you worked on this subject, on the spiritual roots of the addictions.
Yes.
This is, however, a very new, original approach. Not so many people think about the spiritual roots of the addictions. So how did you how did you approach this subject?
Well, you know, I've been working for the last almost 40 years in the field of transpersonal psychology as a psychologist, as a writer, as a speaker. We've traveled all around the world, speaking about things, transpersonal ideas, ideas that and experiences that include the spiritual as well as the emotional and the mental and the social and the physical aspects of human beings.
Just a little break for the people who are watching us to say that Christina Grof is, with Stanilav Grof, the founder of the holotropic breathwork, and not only this, the spiritual emergency network. It's an organization in the United States working with addictions.
Working with defining what is it that is a spiritual crisis. Many people who are going through some kind of personal transformation process have difficulty because they're leaving one life, one identity behind them and going into a new way of experiencing themselves as larger, as broader, as more connected with other people and the world. And at times this can be very unsettling and even dramatic for some people. So we've been working very hard to distinguish who are the people who are going through this crisis of transformation, or as we call it in English, spiritual emergency. Both emergency meaning both crisis and opportunity. And who is it that is really psychotic, that is, you know, suffering from a mental disease and needs to be treated in that way. And we have a very strong experience and also suspicion that many people who are thrown into the bag of crazy or psychotic people are really going through a powerful personal transformation process. And that those people, rather than being hospitalized and tranquilized and given psychiatric labels, that those people instead need to have encouragement to go through the experience that's trying to happen already, that to be supported to, rather than suppress the experiences they're having, to move through them, to experience them fully, to know that there is a broader understanding of oneself on the other side of what could be a very conflicting, difficult time in one's life.
But, what are the criteria to make the distinction between spiritual emergency and a psychotic state?
Well, it depends on whether the person, the main thing is depending on whether the person is seeing this process that they're in as an internal process.
Oh, right.
You know, something's happening to me. I'm having these strange experiences. Suddenly I'm having visions when I've never had visions before. Or I feel strange energies going through my body when I lie down to sleep at night. You know, I see light when I close my eyes. I see blue light, white light. You know, do you know what this might be? Do you know what's happening to me? And that's a very different way of approaching these inner experiences than to say, I'm having these experiences, it has to do with you,
Yeah.
you know, you're my neighbor, you're sending poison gas into my home through the you know, the electrical lines. There's a certain paranoia of, it doesn't have anything to do with me, it has everything to do with the external world.
So it's important how we approach these symptoms.
So it is very important how we approach the symptoms.
Maybe we let a little bit down the thirst for wholeness for a few minutes to go a little further on this. This is very important for us, for me and for Elena, because there are a lot of people around us. They work with expanded states of consciousness, and they report such symptoms, strange symptoms that can make think that you become crazy or
Yeah.
something. So it's very important that the people can recognize what is a spiritual emergency and what are the signs of psychosis.
Yes.
Whatever.
And you know, I stay away from the word symptom.
Yeah.
I would say rather
You're
this
right.
is a manifestation.
Yeah. Manifestation.
Because
Yeah.
symptoms sounds very
Medical.
It belongs to the medical
Yeah.
model and the psychiatric
Yeah.
world. But you know, a map that has been very important to me is comes from the great mythologist Joseph Campbell, who wrote a book, I don't know if it's been translated, called A Hero with a Thousand Faces, in which he looked at mythologies around the world, cultures that had had no physical contact, and saw that in every one of those cultures, or in most of them, there was a mythology to do with birth, with death, and then rebirth.
Yeah.
And that this is a cycle that we as human beings go through many, many times during our life.
And it's reflected by all the mythologies.
Yes, and that all of the mythologies have some sort of map that show us how to go through these different stages of dying to an old way of being, you know, dying to an old self-image, you know, who am I in the world and how do I fit? And then on the other side of that, the process of being reborn into a whole new way of being in the world, of identifying oneself, that I'm much larger and broader and more expanded than I thought I was.
So it's a different identity, in fact.
Yeah.
We talk about the transformation of identity.
Yes.
What do we think we are?
Yeah, and what do we experience that we are? You know, that if I'm completely, I have been in my life, completely identified with my individual self, with my ego, with, with the daily activities in my life, with being a good woman, a good girl when I was a child, a good mother, and then something begins to happen where I meet a teacher or I do some kind of self-exploration or therapy, and suddenly I'm having the experience that I'm more than I thought I was, that I'm not just that individual ego self, that I have an identity beyond that is spiritual in nature. Yeah. That is, and I want to follow that path. Once Joseph Campbell talks about, once you get the call to adventure, once the hero or heroine gets that call, there's a choice. Either you can stay sitting on the couch watching television and fighting the call to be more than you thought you were, or you can follow that call and see where it takes you.
Yeah.
Actually, George Lucas, who did the Star Wars movies, was in contact with Joseph Campbell, a big admirer, and he based his Star Wars trilogy on this book, on Joseph Campbell's idea of the hero or heroine's journey.
Yeah. It's very much what happens in our days. In this, many people talk about this huge transformation of consciousness that happens at the level of whole humanity. It looks like it's a spiritual emergency of the human race.
Yes, I think it's true. I think it is true. And I think we are coming, if we're not at the crossroads already, we're coming to the crossroads where we have a choice as a human community. Either we choose ego side, which means we die to the old egoic way of doing things and emerge into a new self-identity as a global community, or we go toward suicide, where we end up killing ourselves as a planet, as a human community.
Why is it so difficult to renounce our old identity? Many people are afraid to do this.
Well, the ego is very tenacious, is very fights for the old identity. I mean, it's not easy to move from who I thought I was all these years into a different way of seeing myself and experiencing myself.
It's like a fear of death.
Yeah, it is. Well, it is. It really is. It can feel like I'm dying. You know, everything that I was in my world is dying. For me, it happened at the same time I was divorcing. So I was having this inner transformation where my old concept of who I was changing very dramatically. In my outside world, I lost my marriage, I lost my children, I was in a car accident where I lost part of my body, money, status, job.
Everything.
Everything.
An entire world was dying.
Yeah.
But
And-
it was not a death, it was a transformation.
It was a transformation. At the time, I thought it was a death. You know, this is it. There's nowhere for me to go.
Yeah.
But there's a natural progression that happens within each of us that I think we each have available to us that that takes us beyond that point of feeling as though I'm dying.
This is very useful, I think, for the people crossing the same process to hear and to see that other persons crossed the same process, and it was not a death, but even it looks like all reality falls down. It's just the beginning of a new being.
Yeah. And anyone who's in a relationship knows that there are many deaths and rebirths within a relationship.
Yeah.
You know, that two people come together and they are growing at different rates. So there are times when it feels like this relationship is over, it isn't working the way it did, you know, we don't have the same romantic kind of connection we did when we met. And what's really happening is that there's an ending of a phase of our being together.
Yeah.
And if we stay together, if we focus on the love we have for each other, and do the work we need to do to, you know, sometimes grieve the old way of our being together, then there's a whole new chapter in our life that opens up and is very exciting and wonderful.
Finally, it's a question of trust.
Yes.
Trust in ourselves and trust in the reality, in what happens.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
And it takes a while to develop that trust.
Yeah. Let's make the bridge now between the spiritual emergency and the addictions. Sometimes people find this way when they are in a crisis, when they cross some difficult times. They find that alcohol or other things can bring a little relief of the pain, and little by little, you don't know when you become addicted of something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, some people can drink a lot of alcohol and never become addicted.
Yeah.
And then there are those of us who, for whatever reason, do become addicted to alcohol, to drugs, to work, to
To a relationship.
relationships, to sex addiction.
Yeah. To power.
Exactly. Well, look at the global addictions: war,
Yeah.
weapons, power, money.
Yeah.
You could go on and on.
But what is this mechanism of addiction? What makes us to look for something outside of us that create addiction?
Well, this is my theory. I'm a recovering alcoholic, and I say that in public. I'm not ashamed of it. I stopped drinking about 27 years ago, and I think it's a subject that needs to be spoken about publicly, and that those of us who have had this experience need to be seen. When I stopped drinking, well, before I began drinking, I had been on a spiritual search for years, and then I began. I hadn't been much of a drinker. I began to enjoy wine with lunch or dinner. You know, we were traveling. It was very easy go through the duty-free shop and pick up a bottle of something. And I became addicted very quickly. And when I stopped drinking, I found a letter that the famous Swiss psychiatrist Carl Gustav Jung had written to Bill Wilson, who was the co-founder of Alcoholics Anonymous. And in that letter, Jung said, he was writing about an alcoholic patient, he said, the craving of the alcoholic for alcohol is on a low level the thirst of our soul for wholeness or union with God. And then later in the letter he said, the useful formula for treating addiction is spiritus contra spiritum, or the use of the spirit with a capital S, God, the creator, whatever name we give that experience, against the ravages of the spirits or the alcohol in English.
Yeah, it's the same word.
It's the same thing.
This link between the spiritual emergency and the thirst for wholeness, is that feeling when you are in a spiritual crisis, this feeling that something is missing, that this longing for something, and at one moment we try to put on this emptiness, alcohol or work or a relationship or nothing or anything. Mm-hmm. Is it right?
Yeah,
is this the idea?
I believe that addiction is a form of spiritual emergency. There are many forms, and we have 2 books on spiritual emergency that have not yet been translated. I hope they will be. But where we list many different kinds of spiritual emergency, but addiction is one of them. I believe, and many others believe, that each person, every one of us, has a spark, a divine core within each of us that is spiritual, that is divine, that is has the potential to grow into greater and greater depth as a spiritual being. Some people say, we are spiritual beings having a human experience.
We always say this in the journey of the heart as we name what we do. But one of the characteristics of the experience to be human is this amnesia of our big identity.
Yes.
And as I understand well, when we forget what we really are, we long for something. We don't know for what, and this is this thirst for divinity, for wholeness, That's exactly it. We forget who we are.
We forget who we are.
Or maybe what we are.
And yet there is this craving and thirst. The mystics describe it as an intense thirst or hunger for God, for the divine experience, for that growth into knowing who we really are. The veils are lifted and we have the experience of being this spiritual entity. And what's important to say is that every single person has this. That it's not just relegated to the priests or the rabbis or the gurus or the so-called spiritual
this is our nature.
People. But this is our nature.
Yeah.
And what happens in the development of addiction is that many of us are born into a world that is destructive, that is hurtful, that is not nurturing, where many children are hurt, beaten, sexually abused, go through some kind of trauma, and given messages like, I wish you'd never been born, you're a terrible person, you're bad, and as they are given these messages over and over again, they adopt the shame and the anger and the fear that they experience in those abusive situations as their identity.
But as inside phenomenon, this means that the child or the young person begin to identify himself with that being. This is the way how we forget who we really are.
That's how
we are not anymore divine beings. We are just a poor boy beaten or abused or something. So we go down and deeper in this identification.
That's it. That's it. And then everywhere we go in the world, we are told that the answers are outside of us.
Yeah.
Even if we go to church or synagogue or the mosque, there is some priest or rabbi saying, there is a God that is outside of you.
Somebody will come to save you one day.
Yeah, exactly.
After you die. So be patient, wait,
right.
And after you die, you will go in paradise.
And what we find is that heaven and hell are existing right here, right now. I can be sitting here talking to you and feel as though I'm in heaven. Have the experience of being in heaven. Or I can be sitting here talking to you and I'm in hell. Yeah. I'm depressed, I feel terrible, I am suffering enormously. So, people can experience those things just through the experience of being human. But we find that there's a really deep connection between child abuse or trauma and the later development of addictions. It's been shown that a child of trauma, the brain chemistry changes, and that later on has an effect on whether or not that person becomes addicted.
Yeah, it looks like I even talked once about this subject. It looks like the alcohol or other things, but mainly alcohol, depressures a little bit the pressure of the mind when you are identified completely with what you're thinking. The world is such and such, and my problems, this world, and this is a huge pressure. And when we drink something, we have a kind of deep pressure.
Yeah.
It's like a little relief of the pain and the pressure of the mind. Is this true?
Yeah, yeah. And we have to remember that there is this deep spiritual longing to know who we really are. Yeah. And that in the mystics and the poets and describe it as stronger than the desire for food or for sex. That it's passionate. It's reading the poems of the mystics. It's almost love letters to God, to the divine. And so we have, even though we've had trauma in our life, we still have this yearning inside that, it's an emptiness, as you described it, homesickness. I don't feel as though I fit. I need to feel at home. And So we go outside of ourselves to look for the answers. Money, maybe it's sex, maybe it's work, maybe it's
a job, a woman,
yeah,
a car, anything.
Exactly. Maybe it's heroin, maybe it's alcohol,
Or a business.
or
You can be addicted to a business, to your business.
Exactly. And so, we take that first drink or first drug, or we have that first high of conducting a business meeting with the great power that you're given in that situation, and it feels like a spiritual experience. It feels like, my boundaries are melting. I feel more comfortable with myself in my own skin. I feel more comfortable with the world and the people around. I feel connected with an energy that tells me I can do anything. A lot of addicts will say, that was my first spiritual experience. And then I spent the next 10, 20, 40 years trying to recreate that. And I go back for more and more and more. And all it does is to dig my hole deeper and deeper, until I really, there's at the bottom of someone's drinking or addictive career.
So that we are looking for this relief.
Yeah.
Yeah, in fact.
Yeah. And the ironic thing is that that once one can stop the addiction, one can stop the I'll say drinking for myself, right on the other side is our doors waiting to open. Get a sense of who you really are. And then it becomes important to use tools of healing, whether it's Alcoholics Anonymous, or whether it's holotropic breathwork or heart breathwork, or
it was amazing when you described what happens when you have a drink, this softness and thing. I was thinking during your talking that it's exactly the describing of when we do the heart breath work. That's what happens. The pressure of the mind goes down, the body is better, the fluid energies begin to be in, how to say, like a river, and everything begins to open. And it was exactly as you were describing.
But that's within a supportive, spiritual environment, a healthy environment, that helps to show you who you really are. And that's the terrible mistake that addicts make is, this feels as though it's taking me somewhere that will show me who I really am. But in fact, it spirals downward into a horrible self-identity. And many people, think of the musicians and the artists who end up dying from drugs and alcohol. I think that as creative people, they get a taste through their art. They get taste of that perfection, that sense of, me as a larger self, and then there's a desperation because they can't hold on to that place. They can't stay in that place. But so many artists will say, I wrote this song last night, or I wrote this poem or chapter, and the next day when I went to look at it, it wasn't me that wrote that. Something else happened. It wasn't me, Janis Joplin, who came up with that. But the very sad mistake is that that people then try to get back to that transcendental experience, and they have a pseudo spiritual experience through the alcohol or drugs, and end up, rather than experiencing an ego side, the death of the ego in order to open to a larger self, but rather suicide, unconscious, often suicide.
So we try to put in the place of this whole, this nothingness, anything, alcohol, drugs, and anything. What about the addiction to the spirituality? What the addiction to the religion, to the religious systems, to the ritualism of the religion?
Well, look at what
it could be. Huh?
Yeah, I don't know addiction to spirituality. There's a, but I would definitely say addiction to religion, to dogma, to
because spirituality is more like an experience.
Yeah.
Spiritual experience, and religion is more like an institution.
I heard a priest told me once, religion, spirituality is God-given. Religion is human-made, or man-made. And I think that's really true.
Was this Brother David Steindl-Rast?
No,
no,
this was
but it could be.
Another priest.
But it could be.
Yes, it could be David Steindl-Rast.
It seems his style.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That, I think, what if Jesus or Muhammad or Buddha would come back and see what's being done
in their name?
In their name. Look at the wars going on in our world where religions are fighting each other. Because we as Christians have the answers and the rest of you are wrong. We as Muslims have the answer, and we're going to wipe out all the rest of you who don't have, who aren't like us. And this is a bastardization of what spirituality is. Those mystics and prophets at the core, Muhammad and Jesus and Buddha and whoever who were at the core of the religion had true mystical spiritual experiences. But then look what their followers built around them.
Maybe we talk once again about the identification with something, because it's one thing to have the experience, to live it, and it's very different to think about the experience. Mm-hmm. There are two completely different facts.
Exactly.
Once I experience something, once I'm talking about, I'm thinking about, I'm making a system from the experience of somebody. So in one case I am identified with what I'm thinking about the experience, mm-hmm. and in the other case I am the one who has the experience.
Exactly.
And so this is completely different. This is maybe the difference between a dogmatic system and, as Jesus said, the living word, the living
yes.
the living God, the
yes.
living experience.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
we make addiction. Then we make addictions to things that we think about, not experiencing them.
Exactly.
It's completely different.
And I might want to fill that hole with shopping. The more clothes I get, the more whole I feel. And maybe for a moment, when I buy that new dress, I feel you know, great, I feel like a new woman.
For one day.
That doesn't last. And that's happening, you know, all over the place with different trying to satisfy this thirst, this inner thirst for our own self-identity, our own spiritual identity, externally in the external world. Well, it's not going to do it.
So finally, in this book of yours, you make an analysis of all the processes that make us addicted, traumas and inner processes that makes us think that we can fill this emptiness with something. This is your book about all this process of trying to put instead our true identity, to put something, alcohol or doesn't matter what.
Yeah. And the good news is that it's possible to heal from addictions.
Yeah.
That, you know, we don't have to end up like some of the people we've known in our families or in our communities who have ended up dead from addiction, from alcoholism. That we can we have to stop doing our addiction as the first step. And then we have to surrender to something larger than my ego. And I might not experience it, I might just know it's there. I might not even believe it's there, but certainly when I'm doing my addictive behavior, I, Christina, am not in control. Something else is running the show. And then there is a process of you know, apologizing for what I've done to you when I was a drunk, what I've done to my family, cleaning up the mess that I've made through my addictive behavior. And then I'm talking about a program in the 12 steps, but it also appears in so many other spiritual programs. There's prayer and meditation, and there's also a very important step, which is to help other people. Help other people who are suffering with addictions. You know, let them know that there is a way out of this terrible problem. And I have to say that I've met many recovering addicts of all kinds, and they're some of the most creative, sensitive, enlightened people that I know.
But recovering from an addiction, so the first step is to recognize that in fact what you want with this, it's a spiritual goal first. And in this case, we could replace, for example, the object of addiction with, I don't know, the breath, the conscious breath, for example, that makes the same thing, in fact, allowed us to be larger and in the same way as alcohol, so to replace the way for doing this.
Yes. To somehow have a spiritual practice or context in which we can be in touch with what we're really longing for, with what we really were hungering for. And we worked with many recovering addicts in the holotropic breath work, and I know you have in the
heart
work
breath
that
work,
you do, the heart breath work.
It looks very appropriate for this.
Yeah, but the first big step is to admit that I have a problem.
Yeah.
because the mind, the addict's mind, is incredibly creative. You know that.
To justify the.
Yeah. I don't have a problem. My life is falling apart. My family wants to leave me. You know, I'm in the hospital because they're giving me fluids. I'm so dehydrated. And these are the stories we tell ourselves.
Yeah.
I don't have a problem. It's everybody else has a problem.
But you are the author with Stanilav Grof of the holotropic breathwork.
Yes.
Is the work of a lifetime for you and for Stan, and this is one of the tools that we could use to recover from an addiction.
Yes. There are many good tools out there.
Yeah.
But a lot depends on who is doing it. When I put myself in your hands, do you really know what you're doing? You know, have you really experienced and lived what you're teaching me? And of course, I know you do. But in general, if I'm going to go to a teacher or a therapist, you know, I want someone who's done a lot of his or her own work and knows. And by the way, this beautiful book and this beautiful book, the one on holotropic breathwork and the one on the thirst for wholeness is on the addictions book are two of the most beautiful covers we've ever seen on any of our books, and beautifully translated.
Yeah.
Even though I don't speak Romanian,
yeah, I'm very glad that you like the books, because you know, for us, these books, they are not only books. We are not editors in the classic term. Mm-hmm. We are making only books that there are tools for those who are in their processes of consciousness. We don't do any book. We do mainly book of practitioners, that not people that they have theories about consciousness, mm-hmm. but practitioners, as you and Stan are working effectively with people, with groups, with yourself since 30 years, 40 years with this, like Richard Moss and Katie Byron and other, that they don't have theories. That in this sense, these books for us they are very important, because they sustain the process of the people that are working with us in the environment that we created, or they work with themselves, yes. Not with us, but how they work. They're in the process. That is so important for us to see these books in this way. It's not just literature. It's about life.
Well, we very, very much appreciate that's your point of view and your attitude. It gives the books a whole new, what shall I say, a new weight, a new, a different authority.
Yeah, it's different.
That one, that can be experienced.
Yeah, it's true.
And the wisdom from the teachers who really have done a lot of their own work, as well as work with other people.
Finally, all the idea of your work is this, that each one can find in himself the vision and the power to change. We have always to choose if we want to stay in this miserable state of addiction of anything. It doesn't matter what. It could be workaholic or something, or we could change.
Yeah. Yes.
It matches very much with our vision about the things. Our school is called the School of Inner Master. Inner Master is like, as in holotropic breathwork, you are speaking of the inner healer.
Yes.
The inner muscle is that being, that transpersonal being, large being, part of ourself that knows better.
And that we all have that. We all have
All.
the answers.
Yeah.
And even though the process of healing or of transformation doesn't go the way my little mind
Yeah.
and my ego want it to, it can be challenging. But it has a mind of its own. It has timing of its own. And our job is to step back and let it do its work.
Yeah.
And the best therapists or the best co-adventurers, you know, the people who are running the work, are are like midwives. You know, they're there to. They have training. They are there to assist. They're there to help the process along.
It's more about containing the process.
Yeah. And if the process gets stuck, they know what to do to help move
Yeah.
it along. But it's not like some physicians, obstetricians who reach into the mother with forceps and
Yeah.
pull the baby out.
Yeah.
It's rather trusting that this inner process has its own timing and its own way, and that it, you know, with support and with love and understanding, that it will do its job of transformation.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Christina, for this wonderful conversation. We could never had more appropriate guests and friends for in the journey at the heart. Really, it matches perfectly with everything what we are doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Jorge. I appreciate it. You are a wonderful interviewer. It's true. You are.